It's 2025, and Serbia, a country once seen as a stable corner of the Balkans under President Aleksandar Vučić, now stands on the edge of crisis. For 13 years, Vučić has controlled the country tightly, running the government, shaping the media, and keeping the economy under his watch. But that control is now slipping. Across more than 400 cities, people are protesting. Universities have been taken over by students, and the streets are no longer safe. Clashes and violence have become part of daily life. So the crisis began with a single tragic event. On November 1st, 2024, a newly renovated train station canopy in Novi Sad collapsed, killing 16 people. At first, it was just a terrible accident, but soon people began to see it as a symbol of deep corruption and mismanagement in the government. Anger grew, protests started, and before long, what began as grief turned into a nationwide movement. Now, students, workers, farmers, and ordinary citizens are standing together, challenging a government that once seemed untouchable. The country that Vučić controlled with an iron fist is showing cracks in every corner, from politics and the media to the economy and public trust. Can Vučić survive the storm he's created? Or is the collapse of his rule finally inevitable? Let's see what actually happened. The crisis gripping Serbia began on November 1st, 2024, when the newly renovated train station canopy in Novi Sad collapsed, killing 16 people. What could have been seen as a tragic accident quickly became a symbol of deep corruption and mismanagement in the country's infrastructure projects. Tension started to escalate on November 24th, 2024, when pro-government supporters attacked peaceful student protesters at Belgrade's Faculty of Dramatic Arts. This violent act shocked the nation and triggered a wave of solidarity. Students responded by occupying over 80 universities across Serbia, turning what had been a local protest into a nationwide movement. By March 15, 2025, the unrest reached a historic peak. More than 350,000 people gathered in Belgrade's Slavia Square, the largest protest in modern Serbian history. Since then, the movement has spread to 419 cities and towns, crossing traditional divides between urban and rural communities, rich and poor. For the first time in over a decade, ordinary citizens from every corner of Serbia are standing together in a unified challenge to Vučić's rule. For the last 9 months, Serbia's protests had remained mostly peaceful, but by August 2025, the situation took a sharp and dangerous turn. The government shifted from passive intimidation to direct confrontation, while masked pro-government supporters began attacking demonstrators, often with the police standing by, or in some cases, protecting the aggressors. On August 12, 2025, in the town of Vrbas, these masked supporters of Vučić's Serbian Progressive Party known as SNS stormed the streets armed with sticks, truncheons, and rocks, injuring at least 50 people. Instead of intervening, police officers formed protective cordons around SNS offices, leaving ordinary citizens vulnerable to violence. The situation spiraled further when protesters fought back, targeting and setting fire to SNS party offices in cities like Novi Sad and Valjevo. In Novi Sad, the chaos reached a terrifying moment when a military police officer fired a warning shot into the air as protesters approached the party headquarters, sending panic rippling through the crowd. Now, Aleksandar Vučić's long-standing grip on Serbian politics is starting to show serious cracks. Recent polls reveal a dramatic shift in public opinion. Support for the ruling SNS-led coalition has plummeted from 53% to just 42.1%, while a new student coalition, made up of professors, workers, farmers, and students, now commands 54.8% support. Even more troubling for Vučić is the collapse of public trust. Over half of Serbians, 53.5%, believe the country is heading in the wrong direction, while nearly 40% report never trusting the president, and an additional 12% say their trust has been lost in the past few months alone. This represents a catastrophic drop from his 60% approval rating in 2022 to just 30% in 2025. The crisis has already claimed high-profile political casualties. In January 2025, Prime Minister Miloš Vučević resigned, becoming the most senior government official to step down amid the protests. While many saw his resignation as a strategic attempt to calm public anger, it did little to stop the wave of discontent sweeping across the country. Now, Serbia's economic troubles are deepening the political crisis. GDP growth has also slowed sharply to just 2.0% in the first quarter of 2025, falling far short of the government's 4.2% target and down from 3.9% in 2024. If you're enjoying this deep dive, please like the video and consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring more global insights. Now, back to the video. At a time when public trust is collapsing and protests rage across the country, this economic slowdown adds another layer of instability. Demographics make the situation even worse. Serbia loses around 51,000 people every year to immigration, mostly young educated citizens seeking better opportunities abroad. If current trends continue, the population could shrink from 6.96 million today to just 5.79 million by 2050, a staggering 23.8% decline. This brain drain weakens Serbia's economic foundations, leaving fewer skilled workers to drive growth and creating a vicious cycle of stagnation. With political unrest and economic fragility colliding, the country is now facing a perfect storm of crisis. Also, Serbia's decline in media freedom mirrors the broader collapse of its institutions. The country now ranks 96th out of 180 in press freedom, and in just the first 6 months of 2025, there have been 95 documented violations against 184 journalists. The government has increasingly turned to intimidation tactics, including visits by intelligence services to the families of protest organizers and targeted attacks by pro-government tabloids against business leaders who support the demonstrations. But these heavy-handed tactics have backfired. Instead of silencing dissent, they have gathered previously quiet groups, farmers, taxi drivers, engineers, and even artists into action. The movement's decentralized, with the government struggling to disrupt or control it with leaderless structure. Serbia's geopolitical position also adds another layer of complication to its domestic turmoil. The country has grown heavily dependent on Chinese investment, with more than $10 billion poured into projects over the past 15 years, including major strategic assets like the Smederevo steel mill and the RTB Bor copper mines. This reliance gives Beijing significant leverage over Serbia's policy decisions, limiting Vučić's flexibility in responding to unrest at home. At the same time, tensions with Kosovo remain unresolved. The 2023 Ohrid agreement has yet to be implemented, and recent infrastructure attacks have heightened security concerns. These external pressures further restrict Vučić's options, leaving him squeezed between domestic dissent and regional instability. And Russia's involvement adds another twist. President Putin has openly supported Vučić's crackdown, framing it as a legitimate defense against disorder. While this backing strengthens Vučić's hand on the international stage, it also fuels protesters' narrative that the president serves foreign interests rather than Serbia's own people, potentially deepening public anger and delegitimizing his rule. So, the European Union now faces a difficult choice in Serbia: continue supporting Vučić as a strongman for the sake of stability, or take a principled stand for democracy. For years, Brussels followed a policy often called stabilitocracy, investing heavily in Serbia while overlooking Vučić's increasingly authoritarian behavior. And the reasoning was simple. A strong, predictable leader was seen as a guarantee of regional stability, but this strategy is now backfiring. Public enthusiasm for EU membership has declined sharply, and protesters have made their position clear. They avoid carrying European flags, signaling disillusionment with Brussels' support for a president they see as corrupt and unaccountable. The EU's response to the current crisis has been cautious, consisting mostly of carefully worded statements rather than concrete action. This muted stance has only alienated pro-democracy forces in Serbia, leaving Brussels caught between its desire for stability and the reality of a population demanding meaningful change. And here comes the question: is collapse inevitable? Even under unprecedented pressure, Serbia's regime is not on the verge of immediate collapse. President Vučić still controls key state institutions, from security forces to much of the media. His repeated threats of extraordinary measures and the deployment of special police units show he is willing to escalate repression to maintain power. Yet, there are strong signs that the long-term stability of his government is deeply in question, starting with the generational shift. The rise of Generation Z protesters marks a major societal change. Once seen as politically passive, these young citizens now demand transparency, accountability, and real governance, challenging the old rules of political survival. Then there is the cross-class coalition. Unlike earlier protests led mainly by urban elites, this movement spans social classes, professions, and geographic regions, making it far harder to dismiss or suppress. Farmers, students, taxi drivers, and engineers are all united in their discontent. Then, international isolation. The regime's violent crackdown has drawn criticism from the Council of Europe and strained ties with Western partners. Meanwhile, Russian support is double-edged. It may bolster Vučić in the short term, but it reinforces the narrative that he serves foreign interests rather than Serbian citizens. There are also economic pressures. Slowing GDP growth, mass immigration, and demographic decline create a vicious cycle that undermines the regime's main claim to legitimacy: economic competence. And there is institutional breakdown. The destruction of independent institutions, press freedom, and the rule of law has eliminated the safety valves that might otherwise channel dissent peacefully, leaving unrest to fester unchecked. While Vučić can cling to power for now, the combination of generational change, cross-class mobilization, economic fragility, and institutional decay makes long-term collapse a real possibility. The question is not just whether he survives the next months, but whether the current system can survive the decade ahead. Now, Serbia's crisis is far more than a routine political upheaval. It is a fundamental clash between an aging autocratic system and a society demanding real democratic accountability. Corruption scandals, economic stagnation, demographic decline, and a rising politically engaged generation have converged to create what can only be described as a perfect storm for political transformation. Vučić may survive the current wave of protest through repression or carefully calculated concessions, but the structural contradictions in Serbian society have been laid bare. The regime's reliance on violence, foreign dependency, and systematic suppression of dissent shows it has exhausted the legitimate tools of governance. The question is no longer if Serbia will change, but how it will change, and at what cost. The coming months are critical. With Vučić's approval ratings at historic lows, Serbia seems to be approaching a point of no return. Whether this results in a peaceful democratic transition or a slide into deeper authoritarianism remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: the status quo is no longer sustainable. Can Serbia avoid collapse, or is the combination of protests, economic pressures, and generational change a perfect storm for systemic failure? We need to see. If you found this analysis valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into geopolitics. We would love to hear your thoughts. Drop your comments below and let us know what you think. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.